Oh, peace, world. This is Kimon Freeman, Angry Black Man Therapy, representing We Act Radio here live in the Legacy Studios in Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C. And before we get started today, I just want to make a public service announcement. Ann Pisa has been culturally tone deaf and has disrespected the legacy of Marion Barry, and as such, there is an ongoing boycott of Ann Pisa until further notice. This Friday, if you got this message in time, there will be a rally at 13th and U and Pisa location at 7 p.m. Won't you join us? That would be this Friday, 7 p.m. at 13th and U to make some noise to tell Ann Pisa not in D.C. All right? And shout out to all the supporters and advocates that put that press conference today announcing this. All right, now, we are here to discuss the D.C. State Board of Education. The mission of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is to provide policy leadership, support, advocacy, and oversight of public education to ensure that every student is valued and learns the skills and knowledge necessary to become informed, competent, and contributing global citizens. Here today is Ms. Sherice Muhammad, who is a candidate for that position. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with an introduction of yourself so people can know who you are and get familiar.
I'm Sherice Muhammad. I'm a native Washingtonian, alum of Duke Ellington School of the Arts.
Duke Ellington School of the Arts.
Yes, and alum of Clark Atlanta University. I've been back in the D.C. area since September of 2008. And when I came back to the city, I was looking at the progression of the city and how it's gentrified and upgraded, and then I came back to look at Ward 7 and thought, my goodness. And I got to work with the ANC, was an ANC commissioner in the Deanwood community. I chaired our ANC, which included communities like River Terrace, Kingman Park, Deanwood, Kenilworth, Eastland Gardens, and Parkside.
Okay. The late, great Gil Scott-Heron said that change is inevitable, but rather than simply continue to go through the change, we should direct the change.
Absolutely.
Is that one of the reasons why you're running?
Yes, absolutely. When I came back in 2008, my daughter was in tow, and at that time she was five years old. And I had been working with her since she was an infant. And I had difficulty finding schools for her. We started in the public charter school space because it offered my daughter what I wanted for her. And I worked with her at home as well. So I'm not saying that public charter schools have it all either. It was a difficulty with navigating the DCPS space and looking for that strong academic curriculum. So it was a feat, and we were crisscrossing the city, raising her in the District of Columbia. So for me, that's where I'd begun to think about State Board of Education and the trajectory of it. Unfortunately, as I listen to the State Board of Education, there seems to be this inclination on what we can't do, our limits. Right. And that just frustrates me because, yes, it is an advocacy group. It's an advisor to OSSE, our Office of the State Board of Education, or State Superintendent. But there are so many things that can be done via the State Board of Education. I don't understand why the trajectory has been what we can't do and what our limits are. I mean, it's good to from a strategic planning standpoint, understand what the limits are, but that's not necessarily the perspective to try to get things done. There's got to be a way to say, we can do more. There's always something that we can do. And I'd like to see some limits pushed. I'd like to see some real movement among that board. And it starts with the mindset of what can be done versus what can't be done.
Well, you are a write-in candidate, and so you're going to a great extent to see what can be done. And you're challenging an incumbent.
Yes.
We had an interview with that incumbent already. What is it that you would plan to do differently if you were in that position?
Right now, OSSE has released its numbers, and right now in Ward 7, the ELA, or English Language Arts proficiency, is 19.4%, and in mathematics, it is 10.8%. So let's begin there.
Those are some heavy numbers.
Those are very heavy numbers. And those numbers were released earlier this year. Now, what I take issue with, I'm not necessarily blaming the State Board of Education, but what I am saying that's a 5-alarm fire. In Ward 7, with those numbers, that's something that should have been announced from the rooftops so that every community in Ward 7 knows that our children are not successful. Those are not succession numbers. So unfortunately, when I made the decision, the latter part of last year, to run and take a stab at it and see what happens, because I know for me, I've been in the trenches. I'm the former LSAT, or Local School Advisory Chair, at McKinley Technology High School, a national blue ribbon school, an open enrollment school, and a school where you don't have to live in Ward 5 to go to that school. So you can apply and go to that school, especially if you're interested in the STEM track.
Do you find that the thrust of parents east of the river are inclined to do their best for those kids to find schools west of the city, outside of east of the river? Or is there more of a push for their kids to find a school that's in their neighborhood?
Ward 7 families want the best for their children, just like families in Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 2, Ward 1. They want the best for their children, and they want the best education that they can get their children exposed to. Unfortunately, the Ward 7 schools, we're working on making those schools attractive to Ward 7 students and families. The quandary that we're in is families are voting with their feet. They're going outside of the ward to educate their children. There is a small faction of families in Ward 7 that are going to their neighborhood schools, but that's not the majority. The majority are traveling an average of 3 miles to school.
Yeah.
And that's saying something. So as a former LSAT chair at McKinley, we're talking about, well, what do the families want? What classes, what academic classes, and the caliber of those classes do they want? They want the language immersion. They want STEM. They want their children to get a quality education that will make them successful if they want to go to college to get an advanced degree, or if they want to go into the workforce. That's the type of education that parents and families in Ward 7 want for their children. And unfortunately, the majority are leaving the ward to do that.
Yeah, my son himself, he lives in Ward 7, but he goes school west of the river. And I think that's the case, as you just pointed out, for a lot of other parents. But doesn't that further create the problems? Because we want to have equity in education, and if the current model we have is that the school funding is based upon enrollment, then if they have low enrollment, then they have low fundings and low access, and therein lies the problem. How would you address that to try to get people to reinvest in the schools east of the river?
One of my items on my platform is strengthening the LSATs and the PTOs, the parent-teacher organizations. And every school in Ward 7 should have a strong LSAT and PTO, and most don't.
Please explain to our audience, what do you mean by that?
I mean that in our Ward 7 schools, the interaction of the parents and the engagement in the LSATs is very low. And we are not faulting the parents, because in some schools, in some areas of Ward 7, we have parents that are working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. So it's not that they don't care, and it's not that they're not concerned and want the best for their children, but the priority is to maintain those jobs, to maintain that household, and to maintain that stability of the household so that the child has somewhere to come home to. And to be able to eat and do other things in terms of existence. So we're not necessarily placing parents in that predicament where they have to choose. One of the things that I did as LSAT at McKinley, we had an array of socioeconomic levels. And we didn't fault parents that had to work their 2 and 3 jobs. But what we did was we engaged where they could engage. And they gave us their concerns, and we took those concerns and we went to bat on their behalf. In Ward 7 schools, there is a need for some more support, so that parents that may not be able to make the LSAT meetings every month, but they do care. So we have to meet them where they are and provide that additional support so that those parents that can come to those meetings, they can help drive those concerns and to drive better engagement.
I'm glad you make that point, because I think for far too many times the assumption is that these parents don't care because they don't have attendance in those meetings, right? But if you're working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet, you might not have the access to do that. It doesn't mean that you don't care, you know. And I think that's another component to racial equity justice that we need to be addressing. Now, you're a write-in candidate.
Yes.
I feel the pain. I'm a DC Statehood Green Party candidate, challenging a long-faved, iconic incumbent, Ms. Eleanor. So we both have a mountain to climb. So how are you campaigning to infuse the notion that people have a choice in this election?
We are boots on the ground. We're boots on the ground, and we're also talking to our seniors. The seniors are our
most dependable voting bloc.
Super voters. And
super voters.
They are, and they're the super voters. And we've already have the inroads to them. Those years, my 10 years being ANC, we already have that pathway to the seniors. So this is not something that we just decided to do because we just felt like it. It's because we've had the engagement, and I was encouraged. You should go ahead and run for State Board of Education. You know, what your work and what you've done in these last 15, 16 years.
Martin Luther King said, "Prepare to participate." So I applaud you,
Thank you.
in participating, and especially in this election year, it's a presidential election year. That means a lot more voters are going to turn out. I know typically we have low voter turnout in those areas of the city, but this would be the highest in those areas because of a presidential election. So there lies the opportunity. Is there anything else that you feel needs to be said regarding your campaign that voters need to know?
Yes. The write-in, sometimes in the engagement, there's been some feedback from the community that this is a hopeless battle. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. This was done before.
That's right. And who did it before?
Anthony Williams.
There we go.
Anthony
she did her
Williams.
homework.
And I'm a history
That was
geek.
the mayor, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the mayor. Also the mayor that's mostly responsible for gentrification in the city, but that's another conversation.
Yes,
but,
that is another conversation.
He did have a successful write-in campaign.
To win his mayoral seat, because he was running as mayor and he was running for re-election. Now that's a little different. That's a little different from my position, but to say that it has never been done is incorrect.
That's right.
It has been done. A write-in candidate has.
And I would even go as far as to say, just because something has not been done doesn't mean it can't happen.
There you go.
That's another thing. How many times have we seen something that's never happened before happen?
Exactly.
People are hoping to see it again in this presidential election, I do believe.
Exactly.
But we'll see. I know that one of the other issues that's on the ballot this year is ranked choice voting and open primaries, I-83. You have to turn the ballot over, boys and girls. It's on the back. Therein lies a little, as Roach Brown would say on WPFW, a little joogie boogie. They got it on the back. But the ranked choice is a revolutionary voting system that's been currently used in other areas around the country. It's now on the ballot in D.C. Where do you stand on I-83 as a whole? And then the two issues that are there is ranked choice and open primary. Your response?
Let me say first that I love Phil Pennell and Lisa Rice, and I love them dearly. I have to preface that. However, I don't say but because I'm not contradicting myself.
Oh, okay.
I'll say however.
I always thought but was like the most powerful word in the English language.
But it's contradictory.
It negates everything you just said.
Exactly. So I'll say however.
However.
As an independent. These two,
independent. Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You got me. You got me. Independent. Independent.
As an independent, and as much as I would love to vote with this referendum, I would love to vote in the primary, I would have to say no to I-83. I've had great discussion with my colleagues at DC for Democracy, and I've explained to them, as I've explained to my friends, that I don't support I-83 because it violates our home rule charter.
Really? How so?
In that, when we vote in the primary, one person, one vote. One person, one vote. In theory, when we talk about stacking or ranking, that would be a slippery slope to undo the one person, one vote. Also, there's a financial issue with I-83, and I have just done a bout with the Board of Elections. And I have found that Board of Elections needs some complete overhaul. We need to really review the statutes, and we really need to upgrade the operation of Board of Elections.
I'm in agreement there.
As well as revamping and making some dire changes to the statutes that governs our elections. And I just personally think that ranked choice voting would undermine that concept of one person, one vote. So personally, I don't think, I'm getting to my opinion now, I think that when we look at our operation as DC Board of Elections, I don't think that we have the manpower nor the systems to support ranked choice voting. We're struggling with what we're doing right now, and that is a struggle.
You don't think we have the capacity to implement it?
No, we
Now,
don't.
is that your assertion that we have a level of dysfunction?
Dysfunction.
Okay.
Dysfunction. And I say that with as much sincerity as I can muster, because I went through.
Hence, this will be a heavy lift for the Board of Elections.
Oh, yes.
Okay, now I see what you. Okay.
Oh, yes. I mean, they're struggling with what we're doing.
I haven't heard this argument before.
Really?
I haven't. No, we've debated this numerous times. And I haven't heard this. I'm for it. However,
I understand.
You're making some interesting points that I'm surprised I had not heard in challenging the implementation of this
I
ballot
heard
initiative.
your broadcast with Sandra Seegers and yourself, and I believe it was, who was the other person?
We had quite a few. You had Stuart Anderson.
Stu Anderson. That's who it was. It was Stu Anderson.
Yeah.
And so when I listened to it, I said, the Home Rule Charter, the Home Rule Charter, the Home Rule Charter.
Yeah, I wish that was a live stream that was accommodating comments that we could have responded to. It'd been more of a town hall if that aspect was being utilized, and then your voice and point would have been raised. But it has been raised now. It has been raised here.
But Bob King brought it up.
Bob King.
Ward 5.
Okay.
And he's definitely an advisor. He's somebody that I go to, and he's definitely a wealth of fountain of wisdom. Not only
Shout out to Bob King here, boys and girls.
Bob King.
All right, so we are here with Sherice Muhammad. She is the Ward 7 candidate for the State Board of
Education.
You know, DC is not quite yet a state, but we are claiming it. You know, the 51st. All right. So, how can people support your campaign, and why should they support your campaign if they're not in Ward 7 resident?
Well, most of my, support is Ward 7 because I'm running for the Ward 7 seat.
Absolutely.
However, I do have support outside the board because of my work in education. But my website is Sherice, Sherice, dc.org. That's my website to get more information about my platform, why I'm running. But more importantly, I'd like to say, as a parent, as you notice, there's not one mother on the State Board of Education.
Get out of here.
Look, there's no mothers.
You telling me that there is none?
Not one mom.
How many people?
8. You have 7. You have 9. You have 8
You got
representatives.
Wu-Tang Clan on the
and
state board.
1,
None of them got no kids.
9. I didn't say parent. I said mothers.
Okay.
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 So for me, and I'm not knocking any of the state board reps. What I'm saying is, how is it that you have a body and there are no mothers on that body?
That's interesting. Another interesting point being raised here, Ms. Muhammad.
I'm a parent. I raised my daughter. She is a senior. She's in her senior year at Winston-Salem State University. Go Rams.
There we go.
And so as a parent, as a former ANC commissioner, which is regulatory, you have regulatory issues that impact the schools. Mm-hmm. And then you have a former LSAT chair. I've worked with a number of families throughout the District of Columbia. We have students at McKinley from all 8 wards. And then, of course, there's the teacher perspective. I taught math and science at Howard University Middle School for 2 years. And so I'm a former teacher, an educator. So all of those perspectives, I think, have some roots in the State Board of Education. And I don't see any of my counterparts, including the incumbent, that has those perspectives that can bring to the seat. So when you talk about perspectives, I have 4 that I bring to this. And so also, too, exposure to other school systems, navigating the educational landscape of DC as a parent. So there are things, and I'm still going through it because my daughter receives DC tag. So from pre-K or infancy all the way through. Let me also mention as well, our campaign is also focusing on special education. The River Terrace Education Campus is the special education hub or school for the District of Columbia. That's something that we need to be talking about as well because we're not doing well with special education. Our numbers show that as well. So there, and we also have our returning citizens. How do we cut the recidivism? How do we retool our returning citizens for a more sustainable pathway career-wise into the workforce? That's education.
Let's address that for a moment. We just about out of time, but I want to address that before we go. How would you address recidivism? My
neighbor has been insightful in terms of helping me to understand because when he first came back home, we've known our families, that whole block, we've grown up together. That's 50 years. So
that's quite some time.
Oh yes,
my whole life.
Exactly. So when our young men and young women come back to the fold in the community, we have to welcome them, and then we have to, as a community, we have resources and we have that opportunity for them to come back into the fold, and then arm them, help them to help themselves.
Help them to help themselves.
So my neighbor took advantage of a number of programs, one of which was at Georgetown University with the paralegal program. He took advantage of that. He's doing very well for himself now. So there's no can't or impossibility when it comes to our returning citizens.
I love that you continuously refer to can as a pejorative. I believe it is to be. I forget who says it, but I'm the master of my fate, the controller of my destiny.
Nietzsche.
If it is to be, it's up to me.
Yes.
I love it. It's on my wall at We Act Radio.
Oh, yes.
And so there's no room for can't. I tell people all the time, especially when I'm working with kids, we African, not African, American, not American, so we got to get it straight. I want to thank you for your do something. I want to thank you for running. Look at that camera again and tell them your website one more time.
Sherice4dc.org. And this is Sherice, SHERICEFORDC.org. Check us out. And we're knocking on doors. We haven't stopped and we won't stop. So we'll be making our way to your area in Ward 7. And thank you so much for this opportunity, Kimon.
No problem. And this is an opportunity for people. And I told you I thought I silenced phones in here. I had to run a radio station, so I had to program at the top of the hour, the bottom hour. That was always a challenge. But having said that, when I asked you who could support outside of Ward 7, my insinuation was that the majority of the children in the nation's capital live east of the river. That's Ward 7 and Ward
That's
8.
right.
And if you are a person of goodwill, then you should be concerned with what's happening in the nation's capital. And here's an opportunity, because we have a national audience, for them to weigh in. We have a write-in campaign that's only going to be able to get support as voters, as residents of Ward 7, but you, being outside of Ward 7, can still support her campaign, her efforts
Yes.
to do so. So
Thank
that was
you.
the point I was making.
Thank you
All
so
right?
much.
So having said that, and I myself, as a DC delegate candidate in the general election as well, challenging another incumbent, and I have the hill to climb as being a DC Statehood Green Party candidate, a third party candidate, trying to unseat a very popular incumbent. So may the force be with us, and until next time, don't eat an and pizza.
That's right.
And make sure that you invest in a child's future, whether you have a child or not, or one of those childless women on the DC State Board of Education.
That's your shade. That's not mine.
You can pour into another child.
That's
you can
right.
pour into a child. Each
That's
one,
right.
teach one, and by all means, do something. All right? Peace and blessings. Thank y'all for tuning in. Till next
Peace.
time.